Thank you so much, all of you, for being here. I'm so excited. I've been so just like popping out of like myself all week, looking forward to this. I've never even used that phrase before. Popping out of myself. Okay. So it's exciting. I've been at a few Disclosurefests already, and it's grown incredibly, and it's just amazing to be a part of this. And so thank you, Portal to Ascension. Thank you, Neil, for having me in this particular tent to do a workshop. So one of my biggest focuses as far as what do I want to disclose and what is it all about? Well, I like to integrate the ascension energies and the disclosure energies because they kind of go hand in hand in a lot of ways. And one of the greatest mysteries, I think, is us, and that we can put the attention on us, because that's really how we begin to connect with the multidimensional cosmos and all these different parts of ourselves that we tend to forget are a part of us. We sort of externalize things. We look outside of us. ETs, aliens are over there, and maybe the reptilian agenda's over here. But like, what does it have to do with us? Because we're the ones that are going to create the alchemy. We're the ones that are going to have certain experiences to help us to understand the level of self-responsibility that we have to cut the cords with these draining sort of vampiric influences and control agendas and step into the fullness of all that we are. So as we know, I'm probably not even going to look at that. Like, maybe I need my nose. I'm like, no, maybe you don't. But I might look. So, one of the things I think we all notice from a young age is we're fed a lot of stuff outside of just our own internal awarenesses and knowingness. Coming from the television, coming from the news, coming from school systems, coming from our parents, and all this sort of multi-generational information, including history that's not necessarily accurate, and ancestral patterns and things that have just been passed down, and it's not necessarily pulling us into ourselves. And I kind of joke about, you don't have guidance counselors that are like, oh, you would make a really great, medicine woman, or I call myself a global alchemist. That's certainly not anything I got from my guidance counselor. Like, yeah, you'd make a really good global alchemist, or or an ascension guide. So most of the people that are starting to tap into their mission need to survive the school system more than get a lot out of it, because it's not really nurturing certain types of individuals that come here for reasons beyond what we've been fed. So we're in a personality matrix, and that's sort of the 3D element to like who we are. But there's a much, much richer galactic history that has brought us to where we are today. So if we start all the way from like the cradle of Lyra, dimensions 10, 11, 12, that's when the galactic war started to really take hold, because we're in a free will universe. So a free will universe means that we're going to play with the whole concept of power, which ends up having a dividing line between like service to self, service to others. And when we hear that stuff, we have to remember that service to others doesn't mean we negate ourselves, but there's much more about like that polarity integration that I like to talk about in order to find a balance that actually works. So because of these different wars that took place, it began to cut us off from what's beyond our 12-strand embodiment, which goes into the Trinity, which are represented by dimensions 13, 14, and 15. And so we're in a 15-dimensional time matrix. Our DNA connects with it. Our chakras connect with it. And because of these wars and hybridization and the manipulation of incarnate consciousness, we began to lose that connection with the zero-point unified field, and we began to create belief systems that started to really digress us. And then, of course, our DNA gets tinkered with, and we go to school, and we go to science class, and they call it junk DNA. Oh, it's useless. And I always knew that that was screwed up. And that's probably when I started skipping class and just going to concerts and just being like, you know what? Just like, this doesn't make any sense. And a lot doesn't make any sense. And so I started to just kind of self-educate and go into some, interesting topics and information to answer like questions that were just gnawing at me. And I was kind of aware of like this larger mission when I was a kid that is definitely like a shared mission. It's not just like my mission, it's our mission. And it's something that we're all sharing together as far as what does it mean to activate our dormant DNA and expand beyond this system. And some people don't notice it. They are very compliant and they don't want to question it, and they get really threatened by anybody who might. But it's really about self-discovery. It's not so much about, oh, you just don't get it or you don't get the information. It's something that we're not getting about ourselves, because ultimately we want to understand the fullness of all that we are. And one of the greatest conspiracies, one of the greatest attacks is us thinking we're way less than, being dependent on a system that siphons our life force. And actually, because of all these wars, before we actually were in this lower density, starting from Lyran Wars, stepping down to Orion Wars, and then being on Tara, which is dimensions 4, 5, and 6. That's an interesting sound. Anyway, it's like a symbol. So being in dimensions 4, 5, and 6, there were a lot of different seedings of humans. So as things stepped down, they had these different kind of councils and groups that would look and oversee or see over these more advanced races. But there was such a dividing line between the service to self, service to others, that there was a lot of manipulation going on that led to actually exploded planets. So when we think about exploding planets, it's like, well, where's the proof? Well, this is why I like astrology, because I like the proof. I don't like to just say things like, yeah, doesn't that sound nice? It's like, well, where is the evidence in the stars? Where's the evidence in like the much larger picture where we can actually see it with the different patternings that have taken place? So the asteroid belt, when Tiamat exploded in dimensions 4, 5, and 6, because of this imbalance that was growing and growing and growing to the point where the sacred union of Tiamat and Apsu, we can look at it metaphorically too, because it's really hard to get like all the facts straight. But if we look at it metaphorically, those particular wars in that exploding planet really severed the sacred union bond that we hold within ourselves and really began to, totally digress us. And that explosion created fragmented consciousness. So if we actually look at the asteroids, they connect with different archetypes like Vesta and Juno and even Chiron, the wounded healer, our wonderful friend. It's one of the hardest things. Chiron, when I read charts, it's like, and you see a heavy Chiron, you know that person's having a rough time. But it also takes us on the path of knowledge, and so no pain, no gain. Pain is really our friend, and I try and remind myself of that when I have pain. I'm like, oh yeah, you're my friend. I'm really grateful you're here. You have a message for me. But it is, because it's through the pain body that we begin to unlock some of these blockages, and we, start to heal from these, galactic wars and wars in this particular, density that we're in. So this exploded planet took place. We dropped into this lower harmonic universe, and the mother energy, the 13th vibrational gateway connected to the mother arc, morphed into the physical planet, and root races were created. So in Tara, there is the original Atlantis and Lemuria that got out of balance for the reasons that I mentioned and more. And then we went down into this lower harmonic universe, and it was all about how do we rebuild the architecture of our DNA. Because if we're on an exploded planet, our consciousness fragments, and we're carrying like an ancient trauma. And that ancient trauma, instead of like working the energy, we're handed an addiction matrix where we're just trying to escape some sort of like deep inner angst. It's either through getting medicated, it's either through, the money system where we find our self-worth through what we have, what we own. It's also through, obviously, drugs and alcohol. Not to bust on that, because we all like to party sometimes. But there's just this need to just like find something to appease this pain we don't fully understand because we're not being taught about it. And so the root races that came about when we landed in this lower harmonic universe, the first two were very like high vibrational, Hyperborea, Polaris, and then Lemuria, the Lemurian root race, and then Atlantean. But when we landed in this lower harmonic universe and the mother energy morphed in, the whole idea is that she was going to help us through unconditional love, remove ourselves from these control agendas that had started war way back when we were holding our avatar consciousness and we were, in a very peaceful state. And this is free will. This is what happens in a free will universe. Everything under the sun is really gonna, end up taking place. So landing in this lower harmonic universe, we were pretty advanced for a while, but then we had the electrical wars. And that was basically wars over whether or not humans should be seeded again and to quarantine the planet so they couldn't just ascend back into 5D because there was an explosion there and humans aren't ready. They got to learn the right use of power kind of thing. And so in this lower density, which they call 3D, it actually was seeded with a 13-dimensional core directly from the mother. That's why they call it Mother Earth. But because of all these wars, electrical wars, Lemurian Holocaust, Atlantean cataclysms, Nephilim wars, and wars and wars and wars, that trauma and that splitting and that division just grew and grew and grew. And even Maldek explodes. And Maldek is sort of a counterpart to the exploded Tiamat. A part of it became the Earth, another part of it became this next exploding planet, which represented a new balance between the masculine and feminine. And then there's, the moon being somewhat artificial. And then the sun, which used to be Saturn, turning dark. Saturn's been sort of a kind of a prick ever since, excuse me. Like, that's not really a cuss word. That's sort of one of those bridge words. And so Saturn went dark. And so we see that sort of in the Lord of the Rings, the symbolism of that and those kind of battles going on. And by the time the Sumerian Egyptian invasion happened, that's when we lost all our galactic memories. All these explosions and catastrophes threw the planetary body off of its axis so much that the controller groups were able to control the ley lines and the stargates, and they put dark negative technologies in the ground to impact the ley lines so that the masculine and feminine could not be joined together, and that there would be reversals, and we'd be like on a path of digression where we just give our power to something that's going to rule us and run us, and we don't question it because we think that's just the human experience. And so, and we see, how the Cabal and the Illuminati began to build after that. And the thing is, when the when the Earth grids are controlled, when the stargates are controlled, it controls us because our DNA is a replica of the Earth grids. Our energy body, our chakras are a replica of the multidimensional cosmos. So after the Sumerian Egyptian invasion, the mother energy that morphed into the planet couldn't be there anymore. So it's just like in our own lives, if we're traumatized enough, if we're being put in a lot of cataclysmic situations, or even like a car wreck or something that just, that energy actually was not grounded in the planet anymore. It had to leave. And so we, for the last 26,000 years, have been dealing with dark cycles because the mother energy was not able to be grounded in the planet anymore. And that's why we've been sort of locked in this addiction matrix and just going about this human existence, not questioning too much, just accepting, oh yeah, World War I, World War II, Civil War, Revolutionary War, all these wars. And it's just kind of go off to war, and we're just sort of just going along with the program and not questioning it enough. When actually, this sort of inner cabal shadow government funds both sides of wars and basically wants to make sure we stay conquered and divided. And the whole deal is that they want the root races to be fighting each other, because to rebuild our DNA architecture, the root races need to unify. And the whole idea is if we're going to rebuild our DNA to be able to have access to these higher dimensions, we have to all kind of learn to get along and understand that diversity and harmony is oneness, because we all carry different pieces of the full architecture of our DNA. So when we see genocides and we see all these, races getting wiped out, it's because they hold particular codes that if they wipe out, we're not going to be able to ascend because we're missing a portion of who we are. So, unity consciousness isn't just about let's all be nice and love each other. And of course, that's the vibration that we want to see, but there's so much more to it than just that. So when we look at, the diversity of all the races in the world, the unification is everything in order to switch on these dormant strands. So when that energy left the planet, when the 13th mother arc, blue ray, aquiline, sun energy left the physical planet, it became more about how do they leverage these exploded planets' trauma, because Tiamat's connected to Sophia, and that's a portion of her body. And that's why we see the mythologies of Persephone going into the underworld, Inanna going through the 7 gates of hell, and all these mythologies where the feminine's always going into the underworld. And it's just what the hell is she always doing in the underworld? And why is she always getting abducted? And what's going on with that? And why is she just willingly going into the 7 gates of hell? It's because she's dealing with Hades, who's connected to these archetypes of the false king of tyranny that basically want to control her creative energy and her womb and what gets birthed. And so in that level of control, archons get birthed, crazy dark entities, demonics get birthed, and all these things that are using the mother womb end up coming into existence. And the dark reversals that they try and create are basically what's turned into what we would call the satanic agenda. And I don't like to pick on beings, or names can get kind of complicated, but it's just the way those energies are used. And so what ended up happening is the Cabal, or the Khazari Mafia aspect of it, got really obsessed with feeding Moloch and doing satanic ritual abuse to infect the ley lines in particular areas on the planet. And they put what's called the Nephilim reversal grid inside the earth to keep these reversals alive, particularly targeting the dodecahedron, which represents the ether, because the mother energy is actually the quintessence, which is connected to the ether. So when we look at the upright pentagram, it connects with the fifth element, which is the circulation we need to create alchemy, to be able to shift out of any kind of toxicity or assault or attack, is that we always could rely on that when we are higher dimensional beings and not be so affected because we had the fullness of our full capacity as embodied 12-strand and beyond diamond sun or double diamond sun embodiments. And so with the ether being compromised with reversal codes, we lost that connection to the mother, and we've been sort of in this net and this system that we call the matrix, which has now been called 3D, which is a lot lesser of a number than the 13-dimensional Earth that it was seeded as. So 26,000 years of really rough history. I mean, we go back and look at history, and it's nothing but, is there any good thing that we can think about? And if there was, they got wiped out, exterminated, or hung, or destroyed, or their teachings got completely wiped and destroyed. I mean, just coming into the human realm is traumatizing. We don't even have to have childhood wounds, but we all have that too. So it's like, so it's really, really difficult because on a deeper level, we all kind of like are heartbroken. We've witnessed, loves of our lives. We've had love stories before in the past that we got ripped away from, and all this targeting that has basically gone against sacred union and unity consciousness for thousands of years. And we lost that mother principle. But fortunately, the mother was not going to just stay gone. The planetary body Venus and the Venus transits have been drawing a perfect pentagram in the sky. The orbit of Venus actually forms a perfect pentagram in the sky, and it's correcting the reversals. And so in the year 2010, actually the stellar activation started a little bit earlier, but this is when the switching of the timelines happened, where the Mayans understood and other advanced cultures understood that there would be a time in our history where we would be able to not be in this time matrix in the way that we have been. And it was a very prophesized window of what we call Ascension, which has been definitely misinterpreted and also used in a way to infect our creative channels with false information so that we would just be too distracted to be able to receive. So we see a lot of movies and a lot of stuff with a lot of kind of apocalyptic, and I know that's a good word too, but a lot of Armageddon type events, alien invasions, all these things that are like, wait a second, is there any movie like that talks about like the good thing that's going to happen? No, that's up to us to write that story in, which is actually the story of the cosmos and the earth. So fortunately, it's not just like, oh, doesn't that sound nice? Ascension, it's so fluffy and sweet. It's actually encoded in the cosmos and the earth, and it's actually a true story. It's the organic Ascension timeline. So in 2010, the Ascension timeline that was previously hosted by the Melchizedeks that became a fallen group, it's still a very, very high group. There's no chosen one. We all have these codes and energies, of course. We're all just kind of switching each other on, right? So that was also a way to leverage war, is like you have your chosen ones, and then, no, I'm the chosen one. No, you're the chosen one. It's like love and wisdom is the chosen one, everybody. Let's drop this BS, these ego battles. So the Melchizedeks, at least the ones on Earth, because that's when we're most susceptible to being infiltrated and messed with. So the Earth embodiments or incarnations we have, we're very vulnerable, especially in these dark cycles where the planetary bodies off, the stargates are being controlled, same with the ley lines, with these dark technologies. Basically, if we buy into the program that we get through media and news and all this sort of distortion of the masculine and feminine, we are much more affected by things like chemtrails and toxicity. If we're outside of that program, we're already operating from a higher physics that can actually transmute and alchemize it. So a lot of people have already been connecting with the ether, but there's not a whole lot that can change on Earth until this window period, because the Earth body has had to heal itself and get back into alignment, which it is now, because the galactic core of Andromeda and Milky Way are now one again, which is starting to switch on our galactic chakras and help us to understand that junk DNA is actually a treasure. It actually holds the love story of creation. And our ability to access it is to divorce ourselves from all the imposters, the control system, the things that have manipulated us and betrayed us, because it's no different. I mean, we're in a relationship with everything. So why would we want to have a partner that does that to us? We'd probably want to divorce him or her, and it just wouldn't work out. We'd be like, you betrayed me. But see, people don't want to know that because they can't wrap their head around the fact that our system or the world around us is not really looking out for us. It's one of the most devastating things, no doubt. And so even those talking about it doesn't mean, it's just like, oh, okay, yeah, just download comes in. It's like, no, I was like bedridden for 2 years. I'm like, what is going on? Most of my life I was just completely like, I'm like, all right, get over it. Let's just do something about it. Now, so, my interest was like really learning about what this window period's about. And it started when I was a kid. And I was being prepared when I was a kid, and particularly being prepared to not go to Mars and not go anywhere anybody wanted to take me, and to stay real connected with my truth. And I sort of knew I was going to do that anyway, because I was being prepped for this particular window period, that this was a time of awakening. Well, it's not just to information or understanding conspiracy, it's to really fulfill what the Tree of Knowledge is all about. The Tree of Knowledge got targeted with mind control. So what is the real path of knowledge, of being in this duality of good and evil? And you know how some people say there is no evil? It's like, I really wish that was true. But now it's completely overwhelming. You got to just shut the computer, because the amount of rabbit holes, as you know, can be insane. But this is the shadow work of Gaia, right? So we do shadow work on ourselves and also Gaia. So where was I going with this? So in this particular window, the Ascension timeline switched over because it wasn't really working out. We've been in these dark cycles. They were really meant to sort of hold space and be a part of the repair work, do the grid work, and just only small groups ended up doing that. So it was prophesized, and it actually ended up happening. There was an original 5D Ascension timeline, but it got so hijacked through implants and manipulation that they had to do a plan B, kind of like that plan B, if you get pregnant. It's like plan B, and it just changed the whole nature of things, because so many humans weren't ready for these big blasts to come in, and they've been just reworking the calling of how to support us during this time. Man, there's a lot of outside noise because we're outside. So in 2010, the Ascension timeline switched over from the Melchizedek hosting to the Crystal Star. And Aurora coming in from Andromeda, because the galactic cores were now aligning, and certain races that went extinct, like the Aquafarians, began to come back, and a lot of really advanced souls have been born, throughout history and time. But the thing is, if you're an advanced soul, it's not that somebody's less advanced, it just means they're here to switch them on. Because if they're connecting to AI and they can't get the direct connect, our role is to help steer them in a better alignment with themselves, and that starts with their own authenticity. The best way to wake a person up is to help them feel comfortable just being true to who they are. Because if we're true to who we are and we accept the dark night of the souls and the negative aspects that come up in us and the things that we want to just not show the world, and we can just accept that, it's very temporary, and it's going to actually make things move quicker. But if we judge it, if we suppress it, if we medicate it, that's just a lot of work to do later on. So we have to just jump on board with it. So when the Ascension timeline shifted to what we have now, the mother energy was able to anchor herself back into the planet, and it started to activate the diamond heart in the core of the planet, which affected the ley lines, and it started to heal the reversals and clear the energy. Because the Dark Mother reversals are actually connected to not just the worship of Moloch, but this attention on Baphomet, and this sort of giving us false religions and false information to siphon our life force, to take into a feeding tank, basically, to feed the controller groups that cut off their DNA on purpose so they could be in charge of us. And so even Saturn has a black cube in it, and it basically gets all the negative energies that come from satanic ritual abuse and all the manipulations and darkness that we see that are taking our life force to feed Saturn, to then infect the moon so that the feminine stays compromised within men and women. So I talk about the divine feminine energy because there's a tension on it as we move into the shift time, but it's ultimately obviously about balance. It's our right, it's our left, it's our energy field, it's the fullness of all that we are. If you look at DNA, it's masculine and feminine, but it's expressed as electric, magnetic, and then the nucleic acids are made out of earth, air, fire, water. So before I get to that, hope I'm not talking too fast, but that's just what I do, right? So, so when the Ascension timeline shifted over, it's kind of okay, well, does that show up in astrology? Because it sounds nice, and yes, it does, because in that exact year, the sun started to move through the 13th sign of Ophiuchus. So Ophiuchus represents the healing waters that come into the earth to purify the toxicity and everything. Ophiuchus is a feminine type energy. It's actually perfectly opposite Orion Osiris. So if we're healing the Orion Wars, it's going to have to come down to rebuilding that balance. But we have to do it within ourselves. Because to me, we win the war within. If we're constantly fighting something outside of us, not only are we going to be drained, we're going to expect some sort of result to make us feel like everything's good. But if we focus on what's inside and rebuild that architecture and find that inner balance, then we start to move into that junk energy that isn't junk at all. So the sun started to move through Ophiuchus. It's the only astrological sign that's ruled by the ether. As we know, everybody's got a zodiac sign. You're either like earth, air, fire, water. Does anybody like think about, well, what about ether? No, because we've only been dealing with the 12 houses, the 12 signs. And we've only been dealing really with the 12 stargates that have been compromised. When the 13th gate started to activate and the sun started to move through the 13th sign, now the dodecahedron platonic solid isn't manipulated anymore and the circulation is back. And the circulation that is back has a lot to do with the solar activity that we're experiencing and a lot of those peaks that we go through and these accelerations that throw us on our butt and like can't get out of bed and like processing and working all this energy. It feels pretty heavy, right? So Ophiuchus is the only sign ruled by the ether, and it's not ruled by a planet like most signs. It's actually ruled by Chiron, the wounded healer. So for us to get the benefits of the ether, we have to be really, really willing to look at our wounds, really, really willing to do the inner work, and really dig into just anything that's felt traumatizing, because the earth is doing that too to heal herself. I mean, Fukushima, oil spills in the oceans, skies are being sprayed, extinction of animals, deforestation, the fire element being used for bombs and war. And so as this ether element comes in and starts to heal us, the earth has no choice but to respond. So it's something we're doing together. And it's a purifying agent. And it's available to all of us. So because our DNA is made out of earth, air, fire, water, the mitochondrial DNA, which we inherit from our mother, has been damaged for so many thousands of years, that's finally healing. And that's actually connected to the fifth element, ether, that particular nucleic acid. And I'm not just like pulling this out of like, there's a lot of research, a lot of scientists, a lot of like, going into some real factual stuff and then the really out there stuff and trying to connect the dots. I'm like, because I believe everything exists, but can we like link them somehow? Because if it makes sense over here, it's got to make sense over here, because the upper dimensional world should be like fitting into something that we're experiencing here, and if it's not, something's off, and we got to figure out what's off. So anyway, the sun moving through this particular sign was at the same time that the organic ascension timeline shifted, and this is this incredible time of awakening. But we also are experiencing this threat of 5G, transhumanism, artificial intelligence, and it sounds really daunting, but we have to understand, because we have the capacity to really upgrade ourselves, it's not going to affect us as much as if we stay locked in the program. So if we're distracted by the program, yes, those things are going to impact us. And it's also something we need to try and stop as best as we can. But what if we can't? We're not totally screwed. We have to go through what we need to go through in order to switch it on. So instead of it getting all complicated, which is sometimes fun to do because it's like they never taught us this stuff, but just to go back and like simplify it, it's a greater love story. So if we divorce ourselves of this Saturn matrix, where it affects the moon too, and it keeps us in a lower emotionality, by just divorcing ourselves from the controllers, the betrayers, the imposters, we actually enlighten Saturn, because the highest octave of Saturn is the teacher master. So if we can get over the trials and tribulations of these things trying to control us and limit us, and we work with the law of structure in a way that serves us, we can work with that law of structure and thrive, right? So if we decide, yeah, I'm going to get exercise every day, I'm going to eat like this kind of raw foods diet or whatever works for a person, do yoga all the time, it's like that's a discipline, but it's healthy, we thrive based on that. But if it's a discipline where you got to work 9 to 5, you're going to have to work for this job, and if you don't make a lot of money, you're just not successful and this and that. So our self-worth is manipulated in this density, because most people want to be accepted, want to do what's right, want to make their parents proud, want to be that person that just succeeds. And that's great. It's not that that's a bad thing, but what about the other people that maybe don't want to follow that path? Are we all here with each other? No, I'm not saying that. I mean, I've worked, jobs and this and that, and I work all the time, but the whole point is how can we integrate it all? Like, we don't want the polarity of higher self, lower self. We want higher to occupy our root chakra. We want to go into the galactic and download it into our bodies, because when we start to look at, well, okay, let's look at the junk DNA in these higher galactic chakras. What do they represent? So in just terms of like just waking up in this human realm every day, how can we just work with it in a way that makes sense? That's palpable. It's like, that's a good word if you could say it. So it's understanding the love story. We all want true love. And true love does not exist in this lower matrix. So we have to be warriors to the whole vibration of love and wisdom in that quest to find that within by just being brave enough to be fully authentic and understand just the trials and tribulations we have to get over in order to be in that position of self-mastery. So the tree of knowledge being targeted with mind control is actually the quest for self-knowledge. And self-knowledge is encoded in our DNA, but in order to throw us off, they call it junk DNA because, oh, it's worthless. There's no use for it. Well, in actual fact, when we start to switch on chakras beyond the 7, 8, and 9 actually represents the monad matrix. So basically, okay, our full 12 strand, the first 3 are the personality matrix. So we're considered in a 3D experience here on Earth because everything's based on personalities. The labels we're given. Oh, you're a lawyer, you're a politician, you're a religious. You know, it's like we go by labels and we find, you know, people that are like-minded through the labels, and that's fine for the most part. But it cuts us off very often because our self-worth sort of is determined by the personality matrix. We get cut off from the other stuff. So on a more collective level, when we start to move into 5D, that's where the 5th element comes in, the ether. And we're trying to get back to that because we're trying to switch on everything. And so when they talk about 5D Ascension, that's just the beginning because really we want like the full 12 strand and beyond capacity again. So when we go into 4, 5, and 6, that's where Tara was and that explosion happened. So we really work on that balance of the masculine and feminine and understanding that the 5th element is best expressed through the throat chakra, which is the 5th chakra. So how is it that alchemy works through the 5th chakra? Because if we're mind controlled, our words are going to express that control and limitation. We're going to spread it like a virus. If we're talking to family and friends and we're under like a program, we might be disrespectful. We might judge them. We might just create a really awkward atmosphere unless other people are buying into the program. That's why it's difficult to be in the room with certain people that don't want to see beyond that. Our authenticity, though, when we hit a truth vibration and we go beyond that, it's carried in our voice print. So the tone of our voice is like huge, right? You get on the phone with somebody and you can just tell by the way they're talking to you. You're like, bye, I love you. And they don't even say I love you back. And your whole day is, you don't even love me. What's going on? Or like they sound all just like, yeah, I love you too. It's like, okay. It's not like a personal example, but maybe like it has been. Yeah, certainly it has. But it's just like the tone of voice, you know, that we get from our parents, the way we're talked to, the way school teachers talk. The most influential and amazing people in our life are the ones that speak words that inspire us, that ignite us, that help us to believe in ourselves. Those are the people we never forget. And then, of course, there's the people in our life who are just like, man, you know, I just don't get it. That vibe is just off. So we have to understand that the alchemy happens through the throat. And when we're really in a vibration of truth and authenticity, what we share through our tone and through our voice and through music and sound is either going to elevate a person and expand them, or if we're under a programming, it's going to constrict them and make them really uncomfortable unless they're in agreement to that program. Then they can just enjoy their programming together. So there's a lot changing in this part of who we are. And also, when we look at the 4th chakra, that's a place where a lot of astral entities attach because the love aspect is not fully in balance. So if we look at sacred union not being in balance, we've been in a patriarchal system that's infected both men and women. Men have gone through the programming of a lot, and you know, women too, they can be patriarchal. But that, you know, and the inner feminine in all of us have been, you know, somewhat silenced and exiled. And so when we start to come into the 4, 5, and 6, we want to see, well, is there balance in our heart? Is there balance in, you know, our give and take and how we care for others and care for ourselves? Are we overly giving? Are we negating? Are we self-destructive? So like our heart chakras aren't fully like I mean, that's been a hard part of ourselves to balance. And so astral entities love it. They're like, thank you. Because they thrive on imbalance. That's the whole idea of conquer and divide. Choose sides, right or left. This side of war or that side of war. Everything, basically, people are either right-hand path, left-hand path. It's like, oh, well, we're just doing the Satan thing because these religions and Christianity is a bunch of BS. And it's like, well, why don't you just not do anything and just be yourself? Why do we have to choose one or the other? I got a right hand and a left hand. I've got light and dark. Can I just merge them and integrate polarity? So, I mean, that's the whole deal. Because without that, we're not able to get these other aspects of ourself. So when we start to go into that sort of 5D ascension, we're looking at the balance of our heart. We move into the 5D, we start to take more responsibility with the things that we share. We're not operating under a programming. We're creating that alchemy to wipe the mind control away and begin to speak more authentically. And then we move into the 6th, which is our ability to see clearly. And once we master that part, then we're ready for the rest. And so we're only taught about the 7 chakras, but because the planetary logos has been distorted, and we can't really go beyond the 7th very easily without getting psychically attacked, we sort of, end up looping, and we keep incarnating, wondering why we can't reach beyond it. So once we get our authenticity and we get our voice intact, we notice that we can manifest things. We can have a vision in our mind and we can use our voice to manifest it. That's the whole idea of the magician card. And it's the kind of magic that comes through your frequency, comes through your voice, not necessarily, not hocus pocus, but it's that, strong energy. So when we begin to recognize that, we start to activate the higher heart. When the higher heart starts to download into the body, it actually changes the color of the 4th chakra from green to lotus blue. The Egyptians understood that was a really sacred color. They made it, oils, and it was really helping to bring the galactic information into the body. And so 7, 8, and 9 is considered the Gaia higher earth energy because all the strands of our DNA are connected to different harmonic universes. 4 main ones that are still physicality, then the 5th one goes into the Trinity and the founder groups. But the first 4 go from personality matrix to soul matrix, 4, 5, and 6. 7, 8, and 9 is the monad, which is basically our higher mind and our spirit energy coming into the body. And then 10, 11, 12, which is our avatar consciousness. So these graduations are stimulated through these planetary bodies, most especially Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune. Uranus is the great activator. It's electrical, and it can give us nervous breakdowns like, I'm going crazy. If you're around the wrong people, you're going to feel like you're going crazy. And so our society likes to leverage that vulnerability, yeah, they're getting activated. They're going to upgrade their DNA. Let's tell them they're schizophrenic, hand them some label and project something on them so they go on drugs. Or, really amp up the fragmentation that can actually make a person actually express personality traits that are a little bit disturbing, sure. But we don't have the kind of people that walk, we don't walk each other through these initiations. We tend to misunderstand them. So when Uranus is ready to be the wrecking ball, to destroy old structures, to rebuild new ones, we are really blindsided. Sometimes, for a lot of people, they're very much in harmony with it. They can also get a premonition before it happens, I just got to change this job, I got to get out of this relationship. Some just are like, no, I got to stay, and they stay stuck, and then Uranus comes, because Uranus isn't going to wait till you're ready. And that's why people have crises, injuries, accidents, and get really and startled, but it helps them to wake up. But the thing is, the nervous system holds trauma, so if that wake-up call is too severe, one can end up looping in the whole trauma of it all and get a little bit stuck. So we have to really listen to ourselves and work with these outer planets so that when it's time to be sort of completely destabilized in order to wake up, that we're walking with it and we can breathe through it. Because the resistance is going to create a lot of difficulty. And the other outer planets, like Pluto's death, rebirth, alchemy, transformation. When Pluto comes along, Pluto's going to throw us into the underworld. And so do we ever really sign up for that? I want to go to the underworld. Let's go to Bali. No, I want to go to the underworld. It's time to go in the underworld. No, it's Pluto. Pluto just comes along. Doesn't matter if you're ready or not. It's just going to throw you down there, and you're lucky if anybody's going to give you a helping hand. Everything turns dark. But that's where the crone comes in, because it finds the inner wisdom and the light within. And it purposely makes sure that we don't have any help or assistance and everybody's turned on us, because it's asking us, can we find the wisdom? Can we overcome Saturn? Can we go into that darkness and find our truth? And once we do, then we start to come out of the underworld, and we come out and we're just a lot more connected to our soul. But there's nobody helping us with that. And I joke, you can't just call into work. people have the flu, you have to be really sick to call into work. It's like, so what, the underworld doesn't count? I mean, that's pretty brutal. Can I just take a month off? And like, no paid leave, you're just going to have to quit, which I did. Because I was like, I'm going to go into there, and I have no choice because I was already in there. So I got the labyrinth, because it's connected with that. So we go into that zone, and there's not a whole lot of support or assistance. And a lot of times we want to go where our soul's going, into those death throes, and the physical wants to follow, right? So we have to really try and keep our physical body alive while we go through that. Because really, another level of mastery is, can you die and come back and maintain the same body? Because every time we die, we get past a gatekeeper, we get past some sort of dimensional blockade, and we begin to recognize our multidimensional energy. Neptune's connected to our multidimensional awareness, the creative imagination, and all these different levels of the rest of who we are. And so artists and musicians have a strong connection to Neptune. As you see, they bring in things that are beyond this world, and music and things that are really inspiring. And so those are the three outer planets we don't have a whole lot of control over. And so they're doing things in the sky right now to make sure that we all get what we need to wake up. But if we don't understand those initiations, we've got major traps, major manipulations saying, oh, no, just come over here. We'll give you some medication, mostly pharmaceuticals, right? So I don't watch TV, but when I'm in a hotel room, I'm just kind of clicking around. And there's still those drug commercials, treat a migraine, but side effects are coma and rectal bleeding, and you know what I mean. It's just like, what about herbs? Hello? It's like, you guys are people still watch this, or nobody's like, I don't know. But then we got all the fake news and this whole like matrix thing, right? The personality matrix. It's targeting the weaknesses of our personality. So anyway, as we step it up, we go into the soul. We master the alchemy of our throat chakra. We begin to move into 7, 8, and 9. When we start to go past 7, that's when we get psychically attacked. So people might be working their crown chakra energy, then all of a sudden they're ready to go into the next level of sacred union, alchemical marriage, leading to Hieros Gamos, because it is a love story. That's why we see these archetypes in fairy tales of, you got to get through the villain to get the true love and happily ever after. They're kind of like telling our DNA story of getting through the villain, which is actually the one that created the junk DNA and put a lid and seals and frequency fences, not just in our DNA, but on the planet. So when we go into 7, 8, and 9, the 8 and 9 is actually the galactic core connects us back into Andromeda, and it actually forms a crazy 8 spiral around our head. And there's something called the permanent seed atom. It affects our thymus gland, because the glands and the organs are connected to the stargates, which are connected to the planets, which are connected to the signs. And that's why I do medical astrology, because it's just all connects, right? So it's like if we're not well, it's like, well, there's a reason for it. There's an energy block, and you can see, where it is and what it's affecting, and you can actually catch things before they get real bad. Like I noticed something like in 5 years, I'm like I progressed the chart. I know what's going on. Like up until 2036, I'm like, okay, this is when you really have to detox, or else you might something really bad could happen. So it's like a helpful tool, and so that's what I do for my day job. And I have a podcast if anybody wants to join that, to create interactiveness. So I can work with your charts, help you understand. I have a call-in show, just to throw that out there. I'll give you my website at the end. But it's just because we need to work this energy together. And we don't want to do it alone. And we want to be able to be real and transparent about what we're going through. And I think that's, a really important thing. So the 7, 8, and 9, once we start getting past the 7 is when we get psychically attacked. So when we get psychically attacked, that's when we start to feel like crap. We're like, oh man, I was doing everything right on my spiritual path, totally meditating every day, I've been eating good, been doing this stuff, and then all of a sudden it's like you feel like, whoo, everything's great, and then wham, you're back at square one. You just had a terrible fight with your partner, you don't know why. Everything's just going to and you're just like, man, I can't do this, thought I was on my spiritual path. And that feeling of defeat ends up turning us the other way, and we might say, what's the point? Go back, drink a lot, and whatever, do just whatever. And that's a ploy, because the implants and the programmings and the AI and the archons are wanting to mimic and replicate the parts of us that keep us stuck. And if they can get that print, which they're kind of mapping and picking up on and taking to use against us, if they get enough of that data, they know exactly what's going to throw us. And so we have to breathe through those times. So a spiritual path, as we know, is not just like, whew, that's a huge part of it. But when we start to really move through those layers, it's kind of like we're actually moving through the veils, a very toxic ionosphere that has been polluted, just like our DNA has been polluted. The elements of the earth have been polluted for a reason, because that is like a reflection of our own inner health. And because the ether is available, when we do the inner work and we can purify and switch on our dormant DNA, the earth is going to respond to us. So basically, ascension is when our DNA upgrades, how can we not see but a different world around us? The earth is going to be different because we've switched on something that is beyond the personality matrix that is keeping us in this 3D program. We start to move into the soul. We have more authentic relationships. We feel more bliss. We're all here sharing in that together. And we keep going on and on and on until we reach the fullness and wholeness. But when we cross over that 7 is when we really start to heal that planetary logos, which basically is connected to the number 7, a very powerful number. The 7th chakra is very powerful, but a lot of times there's implants and things that will pull our spiritual belief systems into something that isn't healthy. That's why it's hard to move beyond that. And the minute we do, because there's new age deceptions, there's there's all sorts of things to make sure that we don't go beyond the 7 because we're giving it to somebody else, even unconsciously. So when we move, like I said, beyond the 7, that's when we get pretty slammed. And it can be, very defeating for people because we expect a little bit more rewards, right? It's like, oh my gosh, I did all this inner work and, everything should look good. I kind of felt that way after going into the underworld a bunch of times. Like, aren't I done? It's like, I think I'm done in the underworld. No more underworld trips. And no, it's like at least once a week. It's like now I've made peace with it. I'm like, okay, it's like build a condo in the underworld. It's like also the rabbit hole will help you get there. And it's like, yeah, timeshare. It's like, I wouldn't even do a condo. I was like, I'll pitch a tent. It's like, I'm not one of those real estate people. I don't even, so, never mind. But it's just that we keep cycling in because we are thinning the veil. Every time we go through a death cycle and come back in the body, we thin it out and thin it out and thin it out until there is no differentiation, there's no separation of life and death. And the infinity spiral begins to get activated, and it feeds the organs and cells of our body with the instructions of moving from carbon-based to crystalline. And that's something that's, encoded in our DNA. So we go past the 7, and we start to those energy centers opening, switch on those dormant strands, and we move into the avatar consciousness, which is the 12. And the thing is, our consciousness is very much already there. And now that the 13th is activating, the 12 and 13 together is actually the Christ Sophia, because the 12-strand DNA is a diamond sun body, which represents what some would call the Christos consciousness. And I know some people throw that under the bus. There are distorted versions of it, but really when we're in that full capacity, we are able to, because of our balance, because of switching on these dormant strands, which basically represent the masculine and feminine and the elements, and then the 5th one, the mitochondrial DNA, and our reconnection with the mother, begins to change us on a physical level. So through meditation and other ways we can connect to those places, but we can go all the way up to 12 and beyond. A lot of people have experienced it in meditation. The whole deal is, though, if we can't bring it into the physical, then the physical is not going to really ascend. We're just bouncing back and forth between higher and lower self. So that's where we can simplify things and look at our life and look at the triggers that come up and just notice the things that are switching on and then say, well, for it to really shift us on a physical level, we have to anchor it and ground it. We have to make changes that are accommodating to it. We have to get out of toxic friendships, relationships, jobs that we don't like, and really put ourselves in a position of empowerment to say, I can make these changes so that my physical reality and my physical body is able to be a container for these higher dimensional energies to come in. And as we bring in that energy, that is what ascension is. And everything is available to us in order to allow that to happen. And so let's see, I started at 12:30, so it's about, okay. So the most important thing that we can do as we kind of do the inner work and we look at our shadow and stuff is, notice our relationships with each other and, notice that no matter what tries to freak us out about what the future holds, nothing can override what's available. It's the override frequency, that's what it's called. The 13 is activating, it's clearing the grids, and all we really need to do is show up for ourselves. Just being in nature, just observing nature is where we can get activated. Sound healing, different types of foods we put in our body, laughter, and all this sort of stuff, because everything is based on what do we allow into our creative channels. If it's a propaganda, in some sort of infection, then we're enabling the things we don't want to see, and that's why there's false flags. That's why there's constant stuff that will, as we progress as a humanity, is going to do the same thing that it does in our personal life. As we take huge leaps as a humanity, it's like, oh, 9/11, oh, this kind of shooting, or something in the news to just rattle us all so that, social media is completely trying to get a handle and a grip on this event that took place. And how can we not try and figure it out? But the same thing in our lives when we start to really progress. It's like something's going to slam us, and we're going to spend a lot of time trying to process it and understand it to the point where it kind of stunts our growth. So it doesn't mean that we just totally shield ourselves and forget that the outer world doesn't exist so that we can do this. But we have to like be more observers, because it's like a virus, and so are the implants. Once we hook into the bait, it actually acts like a tentacle. It begins to take over the nervous system, and it can, steer us into the AI signals that create artificial timelines. So as much as there's been this organic ascension timeline, these dark controller groups have been very bent on engineering artificial timelines that are connected to secret space programs, connected to infiltrations that took place after the Second World War that have a really ancient history. And we're only taught so much, right? Maybe for many people starting at Genesis and Adam and Eve. And it's like, well, that was the tree of knowledge. Well, what about before the tree of knowledge, when we actually had the full tree of life, 12 sphere and beyond embodiment? What about those stories? What about that history? So we're just kind of throwing like, Eve ate the apple or whatever, Adam gave her the apple, and the snake or whatever. Well, that's actually our DNA template, and the serpent represents the coil of Kundalini. The lower octave of the dragon energy, though, is reptilian, and so the distortion of our history, the distortion of these myths and these stories, demonizing archetypes like Lilith and just scrambling our minds so we can't get a handle on it, is actually us needing to turn it on ourselves and win the war within, find that internal balance, and begin to switch this on and connect with the blue dragons or the ley lines that represents the dragon energy to stop the reversal codes that are creating digression, which does steer humanity onto an artificial timeline. So we're at a very, very critical place. If we look at the disclosure and ascension communities, it's very obvious that some wars are being afflicted on different members, and I'm not going to get into that too much. But okay, so you said I could go. Okay, I might just take questions then. But so in our attempts to maintain unity consciousness, we notice things that are going to try and trip us up. And so we have to be the ones that hold space for that being, shielded from ourselves and from one another, and really take the higher road in everything that we do. Because there's just no way that we can get to the bottom of it based on loose information that we receive. We just really need to be the space holders for this incredible unity, because it holds a container. Just like when we want to protect our aura from attack, we have to do the energy work, but we have to do the same thing and protect our community and protect each other by forgiveness and love and compassion and giving each other the benefit of the doubt, because we don't have to fully believe or follow anybody or prop them up on a pedestal. That's not what it's about anyway. They got their path, they got their thing, we all do. The best thing that we can do, though, is be in camaraderie, because we're equals. There's equality in the fact that we're all diverse, but oneness is diversity and harmony. And without that willingness to create harmony, it's like an orchestra that's playing out of tune, and the frequency that it creates attracts more AI, attracts more archons. That's exactly what they want to see. So the more we blend and harmonize and not get too invested in what's outside of us, but take it upon ourselves to know that we're creating this shift, and it's an internal initiation to switch on what's been dormant and to ignite the rest of who we are, then we understand actually it's really natural. But because we've been born into captivity like zoo animals for lifetime after lifetime, we get so used to it that when somebody wants to open the door and say, hey, you can go back to your natural habitat, it's like, what the hell is that? It's like we're like afraid of it. And it takes a little bit because, we don't want to get mauled by the first animal that we see. It's like, okay, what is this? Okay, oh, that's us. This is actually natural. So we have to realize that it's a homecoming. It's a reunion with our trueness. It goes from our soul to the monad, which is all the sacred union, is basically the happily ever after of a love story that exists within ourselves. And it's cutting ourselves away. What is that anyway? Oh, okay. So it's cutting us away from that terrible partner you don't want, that you're trying to get away from. Once you free yourself, yes, the single time that we might experience and the overcoming the betrayals and the hurts can linger for a long time. I certainly know how that goes, like a very pathetic single person for a while, just like, oh my God. And then it's like, okay, do all the healing and inner work and this and that. But sometimes we're afraid, like, what if there isn't true love? What if I never meet that person? What if that doesn't exist? And the thing is, it does, because it exists within us. So everything that we're willing to switch on inside of ourselves and embody, we're going to notice something that is compatible with it, and also something that tests it and challenges it, and sees how strong can you stand in that truth. And so things are going to try and poke holes, and it's just like you just laugh it off and just keep going and keep going and keep going, because I like to joke that there's 7 billion people on the planet. You can lose a few people. There's plenty of humans, you know? Why even waste our time with the ones that really don't care about us, that are using us, just because we're afraid of being alone and that we don't have that real true love? It's the same thing with Ascension. What if it's not real? What if the 5G, you know, destroys us all? What if we all go extinct? What if everything blows up? What if this meteor hits? Like, what if, what if, what if? What if we understand that if we can keep our creative channels clear and aligned with spirit and our own divine instructions, it can only manifest the things that are streaming through it. Anything else that gets in is like a virus. It's an infection, right? So we were born into this gaping wound. The mother energy is connected to Chiron, which is the wounded healer, which is the part of us that is in pain, wounded, and traumatized. And we're working with that ether energy to heal those wounds with the mother energy in alignment with the Father, with the Christ consciousness, and switch on our DNA. And when we're willing to do that, that transformation is huge. So that's why the pressure of all this is creating a diamond sun body again, because how are diamonds formed, right? So we're all diamonds in the making. So no matter how much pressure, pain, trauma you experience, it's very, very temporary. So, but it also ignites our fear body. What if, what if, what if? So we got to go, well, what if the most unbelievable thing that we can imagine is actually the truth? And because I'm a total nerd when it comes to this stuff, I'm like, well, damn it, prove it to me then. Even though deep, deep down I know, but I'm like, well, if I'm going to share it with anybody, they're just not going to want some like, oh my God, it's all so amazing, without some real evidence. So that's what I do in a lot of my talks, is I have a lot of quotes, I have a lot of diagrams and a lot of pictures to just really hit the point home that we don't have to attach ourselves to any of this other stuff. But if we can't help it, then let's leverage it. Let's utilize it, because it's a catalyst. Let it, you know, take us into the most gnarly place of constriction and fear, and breathe nothing but love into it. Because the lead of this human experience, the alchemy, that's why I call myself a global alchemist, because we're all doing this, the lead of our human experience can turn to gold. Saturn, which is the lead of our planet, can turn into gold, because when we eventually master Saturn, that's our self-mastery over limitations, blocks, frequency fences in our DNA, and the control system, the distortions and belief systems we've adopted that are very diverse, but they all have one thing in common. We fear the future. We fear our power. We feel like we're at the mercy of whether or not everybody else wakes up. We're at the mercy of the system and whether or not we're going to vote somebody into office that's going to be able to solve this for us, or we're in the hopes that instead of a negative alien takeover, that the benevolence ones come. And yes, of course they can, but this is all a part of our architecture. The negative ones like to feed on our negative ego. They like to manipulate the personality matrix. That's the only hold they have on us, because that's what they're policing. That's the realm that they've decided to be in charge of. When we start to go into soul, monad, universal mind matrix, into the founder races and the Trinity, they're like, damn it, we just lost another one. But we have to be willing to walk through the layers that are going to kick our butt, cause us identity crises, fear that we're like going to be abandoned and this and that. So that's the underworld, where we have to find that light of truth, knowing that, you know, we're never alone, but we have to go through it. We all have to go through it to be able to stand as sovereign beings in the circulation of energy that's connected to our chakras and our DNA, and that we get to wake up to the fact that, for me, my disclosure to share is it's each and every one of us, that we're revealing something and blossoming into something that is going to be so mind-blowing. I mean, I'm having a mind-blowing time here, but like, imagine later when, you know, we're able to come and go from the physical as we please. We're able to utilize these great spiritual gifts and abilities and like literally manifest things out of thin air, which yogis are able to do, and just, you know, become like this Merkaba light body. And this is an alchemical shift now that the ether's present. But obviously it's not going to happen overnight. Can you imagine like next year we're all gathering together and it's like, oh my God, look at you, like, that's really awesome. And then it's like, oh, the Merkaba tent over there, he's going to teach you all how to be like these floating like geometrics. I mean, maybe. I hold space for that and hope for that, but that's, you know, really where we're heading. And the thing is, if our physical doesn't make it through the gateways, it's only important that our consciousness does. The physical moves so much slower than our consciousness that we have to be very gentle with the physical body and remind it and reassure it, because the cells and organs are holding traumas from millions of years ago that are so unconscious to us. So when we start to open up to these unconscious areas, when we shine a light on what's unconscious, it becomes our multidimensional reality, and it lifts the veil, and that Saturn moon matrix is dissolved, and we're in that self-mastery, and we graduate from the tree of knowledge, understanding self-knowledge, into the restored tree of life, which is a love story. So all we need to do is say no to anything that undermines us, infects us, tries to contaminate us, tries to throw us a picture about a future that we don't want, and cut ourselves off from it, and only allow the divine instructions of a beautiful future to come in. And it doesn't mean it's all light and love and fluffy. We got to go through some serious trenches to be able to clear out the junk. But that's the beautiful part of it. If we stand in enough alignment, those splinters are going to naturally come out. And that's why I'm always like, and I know that for myself. That's why I'm constantly apologizing to my husband. I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, it's my trigger. I know it's not you. It's just totally like 10 years ago it's coming up. It's totally not you. I didn't mean to project. I have no issue. It's like, I know I'm working through stuff. But if we don't step back and allow ourselves to just be transparent, then we're just acting out weird personality behavior patterns. And we see that with narcissist types and people with like serious personality disorders because they refuse to step into the soul and the trueness of that and the willingness to self-correct or be humble. And so anyway, I'm going to close and maybe a few questions. I know we want to go over to the mass meditation, but the most important thing that I can say is remember that you're creating this ascension. It is an inner process. And everything that goes on in your life and what the planets are doing are all designed to get you exactly where you need to be. It's only our misinterpretation of it that keeps us stuck. It doesn't mean it's going to feel good, but if we take on the task, if we devote ourselves to it, it's definitely going to be a lot more, comfortable and manageable because we start to find people that are going through the same thing and we don't have to just put on a facade and try and be what everybody else wants us to be. And these are the kind of communities that hold space for it. Neil has been holding the space for so many years. When I first met him, I was just like, yes. And so thank you so much. And we each are leaders in our own world to take that stand and understand that the war is won within and nothing but a positive future of organic ascension is available as long as we can embrace the true love story that is encoded in our DNA. And anything less that we compromise ourselves to is just going to keep us looping until we really, really wake up from that. And it's better than we can imagine. And I know that a lot of people have formed some really good friendships that are authentic and really meaningful, and that's a really, really good sign. And if you're not there yet, you're going to get there because there's no stronger energy than this. Everything else is just manipulating the personality matrix. And so the purification of ego and aligning it with spirit and soul and what's beyond is the mechanism behind neutralizing these dark technologies and wiping the control agendas from any aspect of self. So on that note, I hope that made sense and it was helpful. So if some people want to go over to get ready for the meditation, awesome. If anybody has any questions, I can hang for a second if Neil agrees, or what do you want me to do?
We have 30 minutes till mass meditation, so let's do 15 minutes of questions.
Okay.
2 minutes? 1 minute?
Go ahead.
Is it okay if I put this question on my YouTube channel?
Yeah.
Okay. What are your thoughts on demonic possession?
Well, okay, because of fragmented soul energy that's not working with spirit and that's like not anchored in the physical, if we're too fragmented and not occupying our body, something else is going to want to occupy the body. And a lot of the satanic rituals are to basically traumatize a person so much through multi-generational trauma-based mind control that body is easily possessed. So if it happens to somebody that's not in that sort of situation, their life can be traumatic enough and they might be that cut off that demonic possession can take place. And I firmly believe it. I work with people that have had that. I've helped to, assist, and it's a very real thing. And it takes a lot of support in anchoring a person back into their body and allowing whatever needs to come up in that authentic sort of, these are my wounds, this is what I'm going through, instead of that lack of occupation of the vessel. So this is why we need to be so loving and compassionate. We're rehabilitating together as a human race. We need to hold hands. We need to support each other through our dark times. Because without that, it's very easy to...
Channeling a demonic possession? Like, what's the difference?
You can channel it, and it can also possess you. So channeling it might just be like, you just have really dark things to say, an archon is influencing the way you talk to others. It might be a personality flaw that is difficult for people to be around, but you can tell that person is sort of in possession of themselves. They're just not being very compassionate. It's kind of like, if you get attacked, like sacred union partnerships are targeted, communities are targeted. So people can sometimes be listening to a voice that's not theirs. There's implants and stuff that is responsible for it too. But that might not be a possession necessarily. That person might be like, oh man, sorry, I don't know what I was thinking. A possession would be totally different. You can actually see the physical being changed. That person, when they snap out of it, usually doesn't remember anything because it's not even them. And so when we look at these power structures or a lot of the dark stuff, because when I was talking about satanic ritual abuse, I mean, a lot of those that are in power have gone through that. There's monarch programming with even, the Hollywood entertainment industry and pretty much everything. they're splintered. They have altars, so they can use certain altars, and the person will just have no idea. And so that's how they can demonically possess a person, to have them do their dirty work, basically. If that, okay, sure.
Thank you, Laura. In relation to that question, what advice do you have for people that get psychically attacked, who may have AI implants and archons feeding off the energy because they're such a high vibrational being doing work in the ascension realm?
Like the attack because you're...
How can we keep going on with things just
Right.
bombarding us?
Right, so kind of where I was talking, like you go past the 7 and then you get psychically attacked. Well, that's, when I think about it, I'm like, oh my God, it's my life story. Like,
I was learning what you went through because you're at that level where they can pick up on what you're doing.
yeah, well, so there's the AI that can only mimic things that are in a certain vibrational level. And they can use that against even a very aware person. It'll trigger the childhood wounds. They might put a person who's very like open, not fully balanced, to run an energy that can trigger the person back into the old trauma. Like, why the hell did he just say that kind of thing? Or I can't believe she just said that to me. That's like my worst wound. How could they do that? Yeah, and so... Yeah, exactly. So they want to understand that, to use that as a weapon against us, because pretty much everything's weaponized now. So I like to turn the weapons into tools. So if I look at the sky being sprayed, I'm like, oh, okay, that's a tool for my higher growth. If I look at it as a weapon, I'm going to be a victim to it. It's going to crush me. If I look at it as like, oh, thanks for the reminder, then it's just like, damn it, they don't want us to turn their weapons into tools for our spiritual growth. So for me, the way that I rid myself of it is when it comes along, I'm just like, trying to thank it, and I do, or I recognize it after the fact because of however it might have made me react, and I just go into a place of accountability. If I don't hold myself accountable for where I haven't healed yet, then I'm just going to blame people around me, or I'm just going to be pissed off at the world, and I'm just going to think, there's really no hope. So I turn the sword on myself, and I'm like, okay, I overreacted. I breathe into it. I'm like, but maybe I'll say, can you just be very, very careful of saying these certain things, because it really freaks me out. And if they can't, then I'm like, should I break up with this person? No, I'm just kidding. But I mean, the thing is, communication is everything. So we look at 5D, it's our throat chakra. The more authentic and honest we can be with each other, the more we can say, okay, I'm struggling with this. Can you just be gentle with me when it comes to this? Can you watch yourself, and really do grounding, shielding, work with stones, crystals, nutrition, and everything that's super high vibe, especially in those darker times. And let it bring us closer to ourselves instead of further away. Because same thing with illness. We have 2 choices. When adversity strikes, we can either get closer to ourselves and get to know ourselves more, or we disassociate and we go into fear and we want somebody else to solve it. But if it's like an attack where it's really feeding on our lower energies, first of all, I think a sense of humor is important, and to kind of step away from it all and just really work on seeing it from a different perspective as best as possible, and not judging it. The judgment makes it worse. So if we can just look at it and say, this is all a part of it, and we don't blame ourselves or judge others or blame others, and realize, we're not just bumbling humans that are filled with flaws. We're being massively targeted. There's patented mind control technologies that are constantly looking to slam the ones that really have something to offer. If we can not take it so personally, and we can recognize that we're targeted, there's dark technologies and there's stuff breathing down our neck, then we can look at it as a beautiful challenge. So there's a difference. An athlete would look at an obstacle course like, cool, gonna go over the hurdles and gonna climb the ropes and swing on the ropes and fall into a mud pit. But somebody who doesn't want anything to do with this is like, this looks horrendous. Why would I want to do that? So I like to turn myself into an artist of energy and also an athlete that's willing to do the obstacle course. And then I can make it fun because I'm getting better and stronger, and I'm overcoming the things that want to take me down. And I use it and leverage it as a way to wake me up even more than I was before. And I just have to constantly focus on it. And I hope that helps, because that's what I do.
You had mentioned something about the core of our galaxy, the Milky Way, and Andromeda merging. Can you explain what you...
Yeah, so we've kind of been in a sort of a fallen galaxy and dropped down into this lower harmonic universe. And because of these different wars and things, there was kind of a split between these galactic cores. And as the planetary body is healed, it's sort of like a spinal injury that is now healed and the circulation is back. The true core of our creation is actually them in oneness. And so the reason we've been dealing with a lot of these dark cycles is because the imbalance that was created sort of split that apart. It didn't mean that we didn't have connection to the 0-point unified field, but it took a lot of extra effort to find that energy center within ourselves. So it's more on a stronger collective collective level that these forces are more connected because of the precession of the equinoxes and all these different things that have taken place to recover the planetary body from being thrown off its axis where all the stargates were controlled. So a vulnerable Earth that's been traumatized through war and cataclysms and exploding planets has been in her own rehabilitation that we've been a part of. And so it's just kind of like us, like we always hold some level of internal balance. Like there always will be that, but there's going to be parts of ourselves that we need to bring back. And so on Earth kind of level, it's more about the alignment of the Earth with those things. And we were in sort of over here, now we're over here, and that's the core of creation that's now available, if that makes any sense. Yes. And it's actually connected to our 8th and 9th chakra, and actually the stargates and ley lines connected to Tibet and China. And so what's cool is because every organ connects to a sign or a planet, Pisces has all the organs on the feet. So you could be like, and I kind of joke about this, if anybody's, it's like my redundancy with these stupid things I say, but sometimes when I do reflexology, it's like, I actually get this picture, it's like, I'm working energy of like the Stargate in like Titicaca and like freaking Jerusalem, like, whoa, I'm gonna go over here, and these pressure points, it's like, I want to come up with like a map of the body and how it relates to the map of the ley lines and the stargates, if I ever have the time. It's like, yeah, I'm trying, but it's like smoke's coming out of my ears. Like, why don't you just breathe? And it's like, stop trying to figure it all out. So anybody else? Yeah. Yeah, so the 12 tribes, and just, in order to help carry the codes to awaken humans that have fallen into the control agendas because of manipulated DNA or just all the different lists of things that we can mention. They were, they're, kind of like we're all descendants in many ways, from source energy to all these founder groups. The Orphan consciousness is connected to all the founder flames. We all carry this in our soul architecture, but this particular group was supposedly meant to be the guardian of the Ascension timeline to make sure that things didn't go too far, and that the dark agendas wouldn't go too far. And some of them got infiltrated. Their belief systems began to change. It sort of threw the goddess Sophia out of the mix. It became very patriarchal, all about the father gods. And basically the Orion group used some of these names to be imposters to use those names, but didn't represent their names and became imposters. And so some of those lines of energy believed it because they were using the names. They didn't realize there were imposters behind it. So they were very well intentioned, but just got a little bit lost. And so that it kept us from being able to really wake up in a more accelerated way. That's why there's a plan B for the Ascension energies. And so they're rehabilitating a lot of them and healing from it all. That's why we have to hold compassion for even the darkest of dark, because we don't know their story, how compromised or fragmented they've been, or what their history is, or what level of manipulation they've been under. But yeah, now that it's all switched over, all the root races, all are because if we look at our charts, we all have different recipes, and so we attract things that we might feel like we're missing. Like if we're really out there, we might need somebody who's really grounded, like me. I'm really out there. It's like been trying to get in my body my whole life, so I draw myself to very practical, grounded people. Often. So we all carry these different recipes of energy, and the more we mingle and come together, the more we switch on the fullness, and then we graduate from the chart, we go right into the 0 point, and we don't even need the zodiac anymore, because we're all 12 pieces of the pie and the 13. We just have different storylines and different aspects to play our role in switching on each other, because we're all different aspects of the one, of the greater, with that diversity, if that makes sense.
Thank you, Laura.
I mean,
the dodecahedron, and I was going to ask you, can a model of the dodecahedron do any sort of reminding us of our spiritual liberty?
I definitely feel that.
Virtue to people having their own model of the dodecahedron?
I think definitely, because that's the one that has been the most compromised, because as long as we don't have connection with the ether, we can't alchemize, we get sick. That's why we're in a world of so much illness and disease. And when we're going through the initiations, when those ascension symptoms amp up, we still think we're getting sick or something's really wrong. That's what we've been taught. But now that the ether is available, it's a really powerful thing to relate to, because it's a purifying agent. And if you Google the Tree of Life, sometimes you'll find just 10 spheres. That's actually draconian DNA. They have a lot of sacred geometries and different blueprints that have been manipulated to unconsciously connect us into the control agendas. It's actually 12 spheres, and there's even a Tree of Life that has 13. And even the dodecahedron by itself is incredibly powerful, though. But I just wanted to point out that we got to kind of take a double look. And it doesn't mean if you have a 10-strand Tree of Life hanging in your room that you're, under the influence of the draconian. All you got to do is maybe add a circle or just say, she's like, oops. And you know, the symbols are powerful, but we're more powerful than anything. But that particular platonic solid is incredible medicine right now. So I recommend that we all maybe get some dodecahedrons going. I certainly, if you're selling them, I'll get one, carry it everywhere with me. Yeah, because that's alchemy, lead into gold. It's like, doesn't make sense. It's like, and the thing is, we have to understand that the metamorphosis from a butterfly to a caterpillar is very still, right? We judge ourselves if we're in bed for a week straight. Like, whose rules are we playing by? What's wrong with that? So what? It's not lazy. We're metamorphosizing. We need the rest. It's like, we don't have to listen to those outer rules. I don't. So I sleep in and wear my bathrobe all day. But it's all right for now. Well, I usually, you know, kind of consider like kind of gatekeepers or sort of as a group. You know, we have soul groups, soul families, and, you know, different. I just see it as sort of like a part of that negative agenda and controller energy that operates through frequency fences and seals and mind control to put these layers. Like when we hit like a wall and our own thoughts and our creativity shuts down, it's very similar to having to move through that layer. Like some people are like, oh, I'm not an artist, I can't do it. It's like they don't even bother. And anytime we say, I can't do that, we have to just realize, well, maybe it's going to take you a little longer to push through it, but you still can do it. Because, I mean, when I first did art, it looked like a 2-year-old did, and I was embarrassed. I don't want to go to this art class and show everybody. It's just like humiliating. I mean, it looks like a blob of just 2 fruits. Then I went out and meditated. I'm like, I know I can do this. I turned it over, and I did it again, and they basically, like, featured it, and they compared it to the most famous artists. What? And so I use that as an example. I'm like, this is the first attempt. Looks like a 3-year-old did it. And I turn it over, and like, literally, you're the same person that painted this. And because I refuse to have that block. And so we have to realize we're waking up the right and left. We're igniting every aspect within ourselves. If we pick and choose too much, it just keeps us kind of fragmented. It doesn't mean we have to accept everything as the dominating part of who we are that steers the ship. But we need to embrace all aspects, including the dark of the dark, even the Luciferian and Satanic aspects. They're creative powers that are like the womb that we want to like plant seeds into to create new life. But if it's running the show and we're not like integrated, then other things can come in and actually turn it evil. The devil card in the tarot, which is the number 15, when a person gets it in their reading, they're like, oh my God, am I evil? Because they got the. I'm like, no, it's power. The misuse of power is what's wrong in the world, not power all on its own. So it depends what's working with that dark energy. And so the more of ourselves we have back, the better. Anyway, I know I got to wrap it up.